We have 18 propositions left in Book 3 of the Ethics. There's relatively little new material here. The ideas are just recycling of the mechanisms that he has already used to account for the passive emotions applied to different scenarios. These mechanisms are principally random associations of ideas and imitating the emotions of others. So today I'll just finish the sequence of propositions about love and hate, going up to about proposition 49. And contrary to my practice to date, I'm not going to pay very much attention to the proofs. The degree to which you make an effort to assimilate this material really depends on what you're hoping to get out of studying the ethics. On the one hand, you could read it as theoretical philosophy in the manner of Plato and Aristotle. And in fact, this is the way Spinoza was traditionally presented. If you encountered Spinoza at all, for example, in an undergraduate philosophy curriculum, it's very likely that you never got past book 2, that no attention was ever paid to the ethical part of the ethics, books 3 to 5. And if that is your purpose in reading the ethics, then you already know enough about the emotions to proceed with books 4 and 5. All you really need to know is that Spinoza reduces the emotions, all of them, to combinations of pleasure, pain, and desire. You need to understand what he means by love and hate, hope and fear, and that's about it. On the other hand, if you want to read Spinoza as he intended, as practical philosophy in the tradition of Stoicism and Epicureanism, rather than the, say, Plato and Aristotle, then he really does want you to understand in depth how your emotional life actually works. I can just cite proposition 15 from book 5. He who clearly and distinctly understands himself and his emotions loves God, and so much the more in proportion as he more understands himself and his emotions. So what Spinoza is aiming at is to transform the reader's understanding of himself through his understanding of his emotional life. So in reading part 3, the real issue, I think, that the reader has to grapple with is how well Spinoza's explanations account for the reader's own subjective experience of his emotions. So for that reason, I'm not going to concentrate on the proofs of the remaining propositions in book 3. I'm going to skip over them fairly quickly, except for the last 2 propositions. The last 2 propositions are where Spinoza introduces active emotions for the first time. I'm not going to do that today. We'll come to it next day. This is important because it's really the fulcrum on which the whole structure of the ethics is balanced. connection between the metaphysics in part one and the soteriology in book five passes through the active emotions, but that's for later. For the time being, I just urge you to be clear in your own mind whether your interest in Spinoza is in Spinoza as a theoretical philosopher or as a practical philosopher. Apropos of this question, it's an amusing quote from Rebecca Goldstein, whom you may know is well known both as a novelist and as a Spinoza scholar. And she claims to be the only intellectual New York Jew who has not been through psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, and she attributes that to her engagement with Spinoza. So that therapeutic engagement with Spinoza is a real possibility for anybody who is interested, and that I think is going to determine how you are going to assimilate the material in the remaining part of book three. For today, I'm just going to complete the sequence of 9 or 10 propositions on love and hate. I'm not going to go through the demonstrations, and so we'll be doing this quite briefly. So I'll start off then around proposition 40 under the heading hate begets hate. Remember that for Spinoza, ideas, passions, all of the modes of substance are endowed with a conatus, an endeavor to persist in being. So he says, he who conceives himself to be hated by another and believes that he has given him no cause for hatred will hate that other in return. I won't delve into the proof, but just point out the comment here that he makes is he who thinks that he is given just cause for hatred, contrary to hypothesis, will be affected with shame. And the suggestion here is that we will try to avoid feeling that emotion of shame. And it seems to me that shame is indeed the emotion that nobody wants to feel or acknowledge. But on the other hand, it does seem to be the primary way in which we are socialized. So, well, moving on, he points out, as he generally does take an opportunity to do so, to show how this tendency can lead to conflicting emotions. If the person who is now found to hate the subject, okay, but the subject loves the hater, he will be prey to conflicting hatred and love. And he's explained a mechanism for this. I forget the proposition, but we've seen this many times before. And another corollary, if a man conceives that one whom he has hitherto regarded without emotion has done him an injury from motives of hatred, he will forthwith seek to repay the injury in kind, and the demonstration is quite straightforward. So this gives Spinoza an opportunity to define new emotions of anger and revenge. Okay, just as hatred has its own conatus, love has its own conatus. If in proposition 51 he states that if anyone conceives that he is loved by another and believes that he is given no cause for such love, he will love that other in return. Um, this reciprocal love and the desire of benefiting him who loves us and who endeavors to benefit us, Spinoza calls gratitude. And he adds a sort of typical acerbic remark that it appears that men are much more prone to take vengeance than to return benefits. Again, I suggest that you look to your own experience to evaluate this. Again, he points out the opportunities for conflicting hate and love, and he offers this as an explanation for cruelty. Okay, the endeavor to injure him, the person. Okay, if hatred be the prevailing emotion in a situation like this, he will endeavor to injure the person who loves him. This is cruelty, and we see it all the time. How cruelty and love coexist in relationships. And having defined gratitude, he points out that ingratitude begets hate. This, I think, hardly needs any comment. Next, we move on to the idea of how hate can be transformed into love. Okay, so we saw this last day, how love can be transformed into hate. The suggestion there was that he was talking about the context of romantic relationships. And the main point that he wanted to make was that the prior emotion of love has its own energy and momentum, which is conserved when the emotion is transformed into hatred. So he stated that the fact that we have previously loved a person will intensify the hatred that we feel towards that person if the circumstances are such that the emotion of love is transformed into hate. And he's going to say here that exactly the same mechanisms can apply in the opposite direction. So in 48, he says that hatred is increased by being reciprocated and can, on the other hand, be destroyed by love. And he amplifies this in the following proposition. Sorry, that was 53. These Roman numerals. 54. Hatred is completely vanquished by love. No, that's not 54 either. Excuse me. I'm talking about propositions 43 and 44. 43 states, hatred is increased by being reciprocated and can, on the other hand, be destroyed by love. 44 states, hatred, which is completely vanquished by love, passes into love, and love is thereupon greater than if hatred had not preceded it. I suggest that anybody can verify this by looking into his own experience. He makes a remark here. I'm not sure whether this is perhaps slightly tongue-in-cheek, but he says that though this is so, no one will endeavor to hate anything or to be affected with pain for the sake of enjoying this greater pleasure, just as nobody will endeavor to make himself sick in order to enjoy the pleasure of recovering from illness. Next, he, in proposition 45, he explains how we can experience emotion that express our solidarity with other people when they are targeted by hatred coming from somebody else. If a man conceives that anyone hates anything similar to himself, which he loves, he will hate that person. Um, Again, it's just, his explanation is in terms of um, imitating the emotion of pain, and this is accompanied by the idea of the hater, of the beloved as the cause. So once we posit a cause for hatred, we will hate the object that we have identified. Again, prejudice towards others, racial prejudice, for example, in Proposition 46, he states that if a man has been affected pleasurably or painfully by anyone of a class or nation different from his own, and if the pleasure or pain has been accompanied by the idea of the said stranger as cause, under the general category of class or nation, the man will feel love or hatred not only to the individual stranger, but also to the whole class or nation whereto he belongs. So the explanation is just the random association of ideas that and emotions that prevails when reason is not present to check that tendency. Next, in Proposition 47, he points out that Schadenfreude will always be experienced as a mixed emotion. Joy arising from the fact that anything we hate is destroyed. Destroyed does duty here for removed or diminished. Anything we hate is destroyed or suffers other injury. This joy is never unaccompanied by a certain pain in us, because when we inflict the pain on others, we imitate that emotion. I don't think it needs any further elaboration. The only question in this part of the ethics is how faithful this account is to our own experience of these emotions. Finally, for today, there are two propositions which really do play an important role subsequently concerning the causal mechanisms of love and hate. Remember, love and hate are defined to be pleasure and pain, accompanied by the idea of an external cause. So Proposition 48 states that love or hatred towards, for instance, Peter is destroyed if the pleasure involved in the former or the pain involved in the latter emotion be associated with the idea of another cause, and will be diminished in proportion as we conceive Peter not to have been the sole cause of either emotion. So here, Peter is the proximate cause, but if we understand more about Peter's circumstances, we may be able to realize that there are antecedent causes that are driving Peter's behavior. And to the extent that we realize this, our emotion of love or hatred towards Peter will be tempered. So an extreme version of this then is stated in Proposition 49. Love or hatred towards the thing which we conceive to be free must, other conditions being similar, be greater than if it were felt towards a thing acting by necessity. So if Peter is the sole cause of the emotion, of his emotion of love or hatred, okay, we will experience that emotion more intensely if we imagine that Peter is self-caused, okay? That Peter is acting of his own free will. So the theme that we're eventually going to return to once we're finished with book 3 is how reason, okay, conceives all things as necessary rather than contingent. To say that Peter's behavior is contingent would mean that we believed that Peter could have acted otherwise, okay, that he could behave in a different way. Reason, according to Spinoza, sees all things as necessary. In fact, all things as following from the necessity of the divine nature. There is, for Spinoza, no contingency, and the realization that there is no contingency changes the quality of our emotions, both the self-conscious emotions like regret, shame, repentance, and our reactive emotions towards others. The Scholium states, hence it follows that men thinking themselves to be free feel more love or hatred towards one another than towards anything else. So here, for the first time, there's a suggestion about how reason can act to moderate the emotions. And for Spinoza, he's really unequivocal about this. Our characteristic resentment towards other people, for Spinoza, is just as irrational as resenting the weather for raining on your picnic or resenting your car for breaking down. If we were completely rational, we would not experience those emotions of resentment. So we'll see more about this in book 4. That then concludes the sequence of propositions about love,